Hello everybody, welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope we're doing well, and today we're doing a box office breakdown for this past weekend, which saw the anime film Demon Slayer Kimetsu no Yaiba, the movie Infinity. I keep forgetting the name of this thing. It's not Infinity Train, right? Because it was Mugen Train that was able to do pretty well for the year, especially back in 2022. Infinity Castle is the name of this film. Opening up, though, to $70 million here domestically, which is on record as of this point, I believe, the best opening for an anime film. One of the other anime films that usually gets referenced as far as some of the biggest domestic opening weekends is going all the way back to the 1999 film, The Pokemon Movie. And even if you take that number and adjust for inflation and try to be as fair as you can in the comparisons, Demon Slayer is basically ahead even when you do just that. And so this is a huge win for Sony. This is a huge win for really everyone. I think it's Crunchyroll that's also a part of this as well. So really for anyone involved for these numbers, because this is, of course, adding on to its already pretty massive $300+ million international number, most of which, of course, coming from native Japan. So yeah, these are really, really good numbers. Now, typically with these movies, right, especially when it comes to anime, we usually don't get a lot of words on their budgets, though we can imagine that because of the fact that Japan is not America, and therefore your budgets are going to be typically a lot more in control over there, especially because of, you know, potential things with union costs, other things like that tend to make our costs a lot higher, amongst other chicanery. Right now, we are projecting the film to probably have had a budget of around $15 to $20 million or so. That was the last report as we had for Mugen Train back in the day. That film was reported as being around $15 million or so. So again, take that number with a grain of salt. But I only mention that because as of last weekend, as you all remember, The Conjuring Last Rites in its opening weekend was able to break even. Right, it was able to break even, which is something very rare for a film today, to break even on your opening weekend. And that was because of a strong domestic and international debut. Even with that taken into account, Demon Slayer would also, on paper, if the budget is in that same category, right? If it is still in that $15 to $20 million range for its overall budget, that if we take that into account, guess what? That would also mean that Demon Slayer is looking to be a film that also, just from its domestic box office alone, roughly a break-even film in its opening weekend. So again, huge win for Demon Slayer. Again, we're obviously, because we don't have the budgets there, we can't make any official proclamations. Conjuring so far is the only film from this year, to my knowledge at least, as far as the massive releases that were concerned, to actually break even in its opening weekend. But Demon Slayer doing strong enough to where that's even something that we can mention. $21,000 per screen, right? It released pretty widely here at over 3,300 screens, showing a very, very strong contingency here of anime fans. But from what I've heard of people that have seen the actual show that this is based off of, those that are fans of the original IP and of these films that have subsequently been coming out consistently over the last few years, I do believe that this is really not all that surprising, right? Basically that this is a pretty massive audience, and also that this is like a huge movie for them, because this is like towards the end of the franchise or whatever it might be. Again, I'm not an expert when it comes to this franchise, but what I can say is that this is a huge step up, right? The last film that I remember tracking as far as the domestic box office being concerned with having a wide release was Mugen Train from back in the day. And again, if I'm mispronouncing that, I apologize. But Demon Slayer Mugen Train, that film did pretty well for a film that came out in 2021, 2022. Still very much a time in which it was being impacted by the COVID era. Still ended up doing, again, pretty well domestically, right, for an anime movie especially. And then, of course, it had a huge box office in Japan and even across the world. So this movie, as of right now, making $70 million. That's, again, almost tripling the box office opening for what the Mugen Train film was able to do. So this is a huge win for them. Just no doubt about it. Massive profits coming in their way, because even though we don't have the actual budget, we know that these animes tend to cost a lot less. Just go ahead and look back to a film like Godzilla Minus One, right, which was a live action film that had some pretty impressive CGI effects. That film cost only $15 million to make. So now you add into that, right, the typical anime audience. You add into that the typical anime machine, right, the countless number of animators and and other persons that are involved, and you can see how a film like this probably would not take that much money to actually put out there and to produce. Japanese budgets seemingly being much more in control than the American counterparts. So massive win for them, even just domestically. And again, this is not even including the over 300 plus million it's already made, because it got an early release, of course, in Japan several weeks ago, if not even just a couple months ago. So again, massive wins for them all around. Not so much of a bright story this week for The Conjuring Last Rites. Now, take that with a grain of salt. This had a massive drop, okay? So for a horror film, for really any movie, right, dropping in the 70% range, in this case 69% range, that's a pretty massive drop-off. Now, that being said, even though that is a catastrophic drop-off, because of how much money it made last weekend and because of its budget, that is why it can actually withstand this, withhold this, and actually not be all that concerned about it. Again, when you break even in your opening weekend because you have a much more manageable budget and you also are able to perform to such a degree that you are able to make your money back in your opening frame in your opening weekend, yeah, guess what? You don't have to really worry when you have massive drop-offs like this. This is something that we thought was probably going to happen. As we all know, when it comes to horror films, they tend to have very strong opening weekends. People want to see the film first. They want to see it before any spoilers come out. And so you typically have a very front-ended audience when it comes to those horror audiences. And again, with this movie, again, been hearing mixed things about it myself. So it's also not surprising because probably not a lot of people holding over for this one to finally go and see it in its second weekend, let alone to see it multiple times. And again, you might be someone out there that actually really enjoyed it and has been seeing it multiple times. But in general, when we have a number like this, a drop-off like this, that usually indicates that that's just not to the same level or degree as other films. It's also why I think you had films like Weapons, which was able to have pretty strong holds, even though it was a thriller, even though it was a horror film to a certain extent as well. It was able to be a well enough film, right? A objectively speaking, very well-made movie, even though I myself was not a huge fan of it, still an objectively well-made movie, which was able to not only entice people and newer audiences to come out to go and see it, because the people who did see it, even if they didn't really like the ending or anything, said, hey, at least it's a good movie, that you were still able to get a little bit better holdover for being a better film, right? Not even being into the Conjuring verse myself, again, I stay away from those films. In general, what we can at least gather from this is that the film probably isn't all that great, probably not an all-time great Conjuring film, if I had to guess, based off of just these numbers themselves, but doesn't matter. Really does not matter whether this film is good objectively or not. The fact is, this film is making bank at the box office, right now projected to get, by the end of its run, $200+ million in net gain profits, meaning it's going to be one of the most profitable films of 2025. We also had a bunch of new films come out this weekend that all really basically did a bunch of nothing. So you had Downton Abbey, the grand finale, $18.1 million. Now, this is a film and a franchise that really has lost a lot of its steam. I remember back in the day, right, 10, 15 years ago, when Downton Abbey was like the biggest name. It was the biggest property ever, or not the biggest property ever, but it was a huge property, right? Everyone knew about it, especially that older demographic. And we all know the older demographic really is what drove films like this one, and like the first one in this franchise when the actual theatrical releases are concerned, to their overall success. The first film only cost around $13 to $20 million and went on to make almost $200 million. And of course, that was prior to COVID. Once COVID hit, the most impacted audience, and we've seen this again with more films like it that were geared towards this older audience and this older demographic, the most hardest hit audience that just either lost interest or just did not feel comfortable going to the theater. And unfortunately, many of them still feel that way. Again, we're talking here about those boomer audiences, right? I unfortunately have to say it that way. You always hear the joke about it, but in this case, that's absolutely the audience that this is mostly for, as far as our largest demographic is concerned. And it's clearly, right, that they have just lost interest or have just not wanted to go see this film out in theaters or theatrically because, again, the first film made almost $200 million off of a very small budget. Their second film, they boosted the budget up to $40 million and then only barely made $96 million, didn't even make $100 million. And again, that of course was like 2022. So you did still have some effects of COVID there, but that was also one of those early signs of, okay, this audience is gone. So you add on top of that they spent a projected $75 million on this movie, which to me boggles my mind after you saw what you did with the sequel to this, right? With the New Era film. I cannot for the life of me understand why they would think that this would be a way to work. Like, unless you're able to have a property or an IP that has cross audience, we think of a Top Gun Maverick, for instance, that had a massive amount of people like in that boomer level class, right, in that boomer audience that showed up for it, but it also, and most importantly, had the younger audiences too, and had all those other in-between audiences as well. This is almost strictly for the older demographic, and they are just not showing up for these movies. And so, again, a $75 million production budget, $18 million domestic opening, $30 million total worldwide global opening. Yeah, this film, it's just showing you that, yeah, the franchise that once used to be so strong and once used to be so well-loved, especially amongst that demographic, is just donezo when it comes to theatrical releases and what that's concerned. We also had The Long Walk here. This is an adaptation of a Stephen King novel, and we all know Stephen King is, again, not a very smart person when it comes to the things he says publicly, and a pretty heartless person to boot. We obviously pray for him because he needs a lot of prayers for his own personal conversion, in fact, with all of the nonsense that he has said most recently, especially about some of the horrific events of the last couple of days, especially. But this adaptation of one of his works, yeah, from Lionsgate. Typically, Lionsgate is not known for putting out the best movies, typically are not the best performing films at the box office either. So even though this film cost around $20 million or so to make, only made $11.5 million here domestically. It's pretty much all that we're getting as far as the actual box office reports as of the recording of this video. Did not get a full slated release, only 2,800 screens, but yeah. This film also not looking to be in the best position. I've heard some mixed things about it, but I can say I have no desire to spend any money on this film, simply for the fact that I don't want to support anything that might give a dollar to someone like Stephen King. Just going to put that out there because, yeah, I think action should have consequences. The number 5 film, surprisingly, is actually a Disney movie, and it's Toy Story. That's right. That's the OG Toy Story from back in the day, right? Back from 1999. Made $3.5 million this past weekend. So the top 5 this weekend being cracked by a film from 26 years ago. Again, kind of speaks to the modern era of Hollywood. And so, again, just wanted to put that out there. Weapons still holding, right? Obviously, towards the end of its run, losing almost 1,000 screens this weekend after 6 weeks of release. Again, a pretty strong run at the box office, still nowhere near the level of what the film Sinners was able to do, but still well enough nonetheless. $2.7 million this weekend, 48% drop. Hamilton still stuck around this second weekend, added theaters, and made less money. Again, Disney must have thought, oh man, this opening weekend was huge. It's like, yeah, those are the people that actually wanted to go and see it on the big screen, right? That was your very small number of people, because I think they made, what, $10 million or so in that opening. Even K-pop Demon Hunters. Okay, think about Hamilton and how many people love Hamilton, especially amongst the musical theater crowd. And then think about K-pop Demon Hunters being more of a recent thing, right, from the last few months. K-pop Demon Hunters in its specialty release, right, only being released on, I think, Saturday and Sunday, right? So not even getting a full slate of releases, still made $20 million. Hamilton only made $10 or so million. I don't know what they were thinking by saying, oh yeah, let's put this in even more theaters. Catastrophic drop of 78%. And again, this is a film that is just overall making money for them because it was a Disney Plus property. But to me, this is almost embarrassing for them because it honestly looks like when you're adding screens, they thought, ooh, it was so successful. Let's make it more available. No one went to go and see it. So again, Disney here trying to continue whatever nonsense that they want to push. Freaker Friday, number 8 spot here, $2.1 million. Again, pretty much donezo at the box office. But hey, had a much better run than anyone could have expected. Spinal Tap, The End Continues. That's right, Spinal Tap 2, the sequel to the original mockumentary. This was not expected to make a whole lot of money because it is a mockumentary. It is from probably fans who are people who are fans of the first Rob Reiner Spinal Tap movie. Probably are a much smaller group in general, right? It's much more of a niche audience, more of like a cult classic type audience. So we weren't expecting all that much, but this is still, I think, pretty bad numbers here, especially for the kind of budget that this film ultimately had. And then round up the top 10, you've got the re-release of The Sound of Music, making $1.4 million there. Yeah. Oh man. This is just the world that we live in today with the box office. Anyway, going over to Demon Slayer, as I mentioned, right, $70 million domestic, but those international numbers, again, most of it's from Japan. $213 million from Japan, but it's made $30 million in South Korea, also $23.6 million in Taiwan, Hong Kong, $10.8 million there too. As far as the overall releases are concerned, it is still not yet released in at least countries like Belgium and Austria, And let's see if there's any other places there. France, it is not yet released there. Germany, not yet released there either. Looks like we're still waiting on some releases for Luxembourg, so probably not a whole lot left to be gotten from at least that audience. And let's see, anything else? Switzerland, the French-speaking film. Switzerland, the German-speaking. Okay, so the German-speaking area or theaters, I guess, is what that is trying to get past. So again, not a whole lot of major markets left. So this film has pretty much made what it's going to make internationally. The real question is going to be is how much better does this film do domestically, right? Do we see, again, I do think just like with anime, just like with the horror films too, you're probably going to see a pretty massive drop-off in that second weekend because, again, fans of the franchise, they're seeing that thing opening weekend. These are typically not movies that are able to branch out and reach out to other non-anime fans. So I don't think anyone who does not already know who Demon Slayer is or what Demon Slayer is as a property or as an IP is necessarily going to be able to be inspired to go and see it. And again, when you have money like this, it does show some growth here. And so clearly, from even just the last major film that they had in theaters, we've seen some pretty massive growth. So either that is meaning, one, that the audience for Demon Slayer has grown that much, like there's that many more fans of it, or more people are open to seeing it this time around. Which one of those is the case? We'll find out next weekend when we see that second weekend drop off. But hey, the fact remains, massive success for them, probably on its way to $100 million, at least domestically, which again would be a pretty a massive win for them overall. Now, again, it is essentially done as far as any new releases are concerned from different markets, but it did just release in a lot of different markets, so we could still see that there might be some extra gas left in the tank, at least for some of these markets, as it continues to go on. The Conjuring Last Rites is at $332 million globally. Again, a massive amount for a film with its budget as a rated R horror film as well. So one of the most successful films of this year, looking to have one of the biggest box office profits of this year as well. Downton Abbey, $30 million globally. Again, for a film that costs $75 million. Don't know exactly why they would spend that kind of money. It's not being reported at thenumbers.com as of right now. But yeah, not looking great for this as far as a start is concerned. Not likely going to get anywhere close to the success of the first film, and may not even be able to reach that of the second film either. Second film, just on paper at $40 million worth of a budget, was also, again, really not a success in any way. Toy Story, again, 1995 release. Sorry, I said 99 earlier. 1995 release. Man, oh man, time has really flown. And it is hilarious to see a chart like this because you're like, well, yeah, of course, this film came out back in 1995. Why would they expect it to be anywhere close to anything? Because, again, these are re-releases. Weapons at $259 million here, so it is slowing down quite a bit. So we're probably looking at maybe a max of, 270, 275, maybe. It's slowing down quite a bit, though, so maybe it just barely cracks 265. But still, a huge win for them for where they started and for where they have been able to come to down the line. Hamilton is essentially done at the box office here, so this is just raw profits for them, depending on how they split the rights with the original owners, of course, of the Hamilton IP. With those distribution sales, so we'll have to wait and see on that one, I guess. But in general, this past weekend was a massive catastrophe for them, and just shows you it's like, yeah, you had your fans, they all showed up that first weekend, and now they're pretty much done. Freaker Friday from this past year, $146 million, again, not reaching the success of the first movie, but doing much better than anyone could have anticipated, and was able to make its money back with 3.5 times its budget, so easily breaking that 3 times typical box office break-even point in today's market. Spinal Tap 2, The End continues, only $1.6 million, so nothing being reported anywhere else. That this is also only 0.1 times its budget. This is the kind of film where it is being released by Bleecker Street, so you might be able to see some films, something from this film, maybe down the stretch, if it's able to, for instance, be able to sell its distribution rights to be on Netflix or to be on one of the streaming platforms. Maybe it gets some money back there. Again, it wasn't the most expensive film out there, but theatrically, all we can say right now is it's not making its money back theatrically. And again, had to see the film myself before I can say more about it. Sound of Music, great to see that film re-released there. And then The Long Walk, $11.5 million there. Again, not the worst box office opening, but on a $20 million budget, 0.6 times your budget in your opening weekend. It's definitely not what you would want it to be. Having Stephen King's name on it, I think, is probably going to end up hurting this film because of the nonsense that he has recently said. You do have people like J.T. Molnar, Francis Lawrence. J.T. Molnar was also, I believe, a writer on this as far as the adaptation is concerned. And he was involved with a great film from just a couple years ago called Strange Darling. It's the only thing I had any interest in this movie with. But I will say say, again, I'm not going to give a dime to this movie. Even if I end up seeing it, I'm not going to give a dime to this movie simply for the fact that I do not want any of my money going as royalties to anything related to Stephen King with the kind of nonsense that he has. And I would recommend other people do that too, because, hey, words should have consequences. Let's go to the charts, because we love charts on OMB Reviews as we wrap things up for today. And so, as I had mentioned before, with The Conjuring Last Rites, we can make some projections. So because it's made $332 million as of this weekend, right after 2 weeks total, that means we can project, based off of the typical historical trends, that it'll likely make between $475 to $665 million at the global box office. Probably expected to get closer to 475, if not maybe even a little bit less, simply because I think it's going to be very front-loaded basically everywhere, but that's okay. This film's already made a ton of profit even after just 2 weeks of release, broke even after just one weekend. With a $55 million budget, we can project the film's going to make between $200 to $300 million in global net profits. Again, we're looking at somewhere between $200 and $300 million in net profits. As of this weekend, it's currently at $70 million in net profits. So again, massive win for them. It was already a massive win for them when they broke even last weekend. Now they're just adding to their net profit, their net gains. It's going to get to $100 million probably by the end of next weekend. So yeah, kudos to them for making a film that is doing very, very well. Downton Abbey is $60 million in the red, as I mentioned before. Don't know the logic and reasoning as to why they thought $75 million worth of a production budget was worth it for a film like this after, again, especially that second movie and really the lost interest in this IP. This is not an attack against Downton Abbey. Again, I've watched my fair share of Downton Abbey episodes, and it is something that, yeah, it's like that thing you can turn on and just say, you know what? It's kind of nice just to go back to this other time. It's kind of nice to just have these different characters, great character actors that are part of the show too. But yeah, I mean, I can't really say I'm surprised that the older audiences are just not showing up, because ever since COVID especially, they have been very impacted in those decisions overall. Probably most of it due to completely irrational fear of public locations, amongst other things, because if anyone believed the nonsense that was put forward for quite a long time after the COVID stuff, we know it was the boomer class that held on to those beliefs, actually bought them, and many of them still do buy and believe the nonsense they were sold, and so it's not really all that surprising. Long Walk with $11.5 million, nothing being reported currently internationally, $23.6 million in the red, and the Bounce app, The End Continues, $32 million currently in the red, based off of the numbers that have been reported so far. Some other updates: Weapons, $68 million in net profits, so a huge win for them. But still, what we can see is that we're going to see an easy win for Conjuring for global box office and also for total profits. Again, one of the most profitable films of this year is going to be The Conjuring Last Rites, based off of the numbers as we're currently seeing them. Freaker Friday, $10 million in net profits. Again, not the biggest of wins, but hey, they're making money. They're going to be happy with that. Bad Guys 2, still $20 million in the red, not likely going to change. Naked Gun, same situation there. Fantastic Four, basically done, $122 million in the red. This number will go up once we get that budget. Smurfs, still in the red. Eddington, still in the red. James Gunn Superman, $615 million globally, still $39 million in the red. So no matter what you think or say, not a huge box office hit or success. Rebirth, essentially donezo at the box office. So what we had thought was going to happen prior, right, even though it did have a much better run domestically and seemed to have some pretty good holds for the kind of movie that it was, especially for being as bad of a movie as it really is. People thought, is $1 billion even possible? Clearly that's not happening here. I think the international just ran out of gas. And what we're seeing now is that consistent drop off from every one of these movies, right? We saw that the last movie that came out barely made it to $1 billion. This film was not looking like it was going to be able to track as well. And sure enough, it's going to fall about as much as the previous film had from the other one too. So people are losing interest in these movies. So even though it is profitable, again, $100+ million in net profit is nothing to lift your nose at, right? That's without any VOD sales. That's without Blu-ray and 4K sales or any other dealings that they might have had. So this is still reason for them to continue this franchise going forward, but their audience is shrinking. Their audience is shrinking by quite a bit, and there's going to come a point when they're just not going to be able to justify these movies anymore. Have they reached their ceiling? Is this their low point? Is this like basically like is this the audience that will show up to it no matter what? Because every franchise, every IP has that bare minimum, right? That bare minimum audience that will show up and consume anything and everything that has, whatever IP it is or whatever studios involved have those people. Is this where the Jurassic World franchise is? I think there's a lot more that could drop off. I think that you'll probably see the next film maybe get only like $750 million, which again, with the budget that they're using on this, would still actually likely make a little bit of profit for them. But I don't see how much further that they can really take this going forward. So anyway, those are the numbers as they stand. Those are the last films I wanted to update. What are y'all's thoughts? Let me know. Did you see Spinal Tap 2, The Long Walk, Downton Abbey, or any of the films from the previous weeks? If there's any films that I had missed, please also mention those in the comment section down below. Sometimes there's ones where, because of just a limited release, for instance, if you go to thenumbers.com, you'll notice that there were some History of Sound, Women in Christ, and Bang Bang. Okay, that's not enough theaters for me to be able to do much of anything with, so I'm just not going to be charting those, because it's just, again, my chart is more meant for those films that have either a global release or at the very least some very public numbers domestically. And so let me know your thoughts about that and anything else I mentioned in the comment section down below. If you like this video, make sure that you smash that like button. Make sure you also smash the rumble button as well. You guys are all amazing and beautiful. Have a wonderful rest of your day. A blessed feast of the exaltation of the Holy Cross. Today in the church, we celebrate the feast of the finding of the Holy Cross on its exaltation, right? That we as Christians especially find much love and our entire salvation, right? Our entire identity within the cross itself. And so this is a wonderful feast day in the church. So I pray for everybody, everyone especially who is struggling right now, those who have lost their lives. And we, again, continue to pray for Charlie Kirk, his family, and also all those who have been victims of violence over the last several weeks and across our world too. Is, again, we need to be the peacemakers that our time so desperately needs. And so we pray for God's grace to be those persons and to be that light that the world desperately needs right now. You guys are awesome. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless. And now let me give a shout out to all of my Chosen of Valhalla members, starting off first with my Patreon members, Father Luca Illich, hail to you, Father, and also to Miss Martin Muses. Check out her YouTube channel by the same name, Miss Martin Muses. She is very lovely, great, awesome Catholic faith-based content over there. You'll also find over on Subscribestar my member Matt317. He is on Twitch with the same channel name, Matt317. Shout out to you, good sir. And also to a longtime member here, Mr. Roy, my Chosen of Valhalla member here on YouTube. Mr. Roy, thank you for always hanging out and for always being a part of this channel. It does mean a lot, as well as it does for all of my Chosen of Valhalla members. And if you want your name shouted out at the end of every live stream or video, or if you want it listed in that list that was playing just before, just now, check out the top link in the video description below. You'll find out how to get those types of shout outs at the end of every live stream and video. Not to mention, you get access to bonus video content and also access to a Discord server where there are a couple of channels on there where I do giveaways every single month. In fact, I do multiple giveaways every single month. I try to make it so that I'm giving away Blu-rays and 4Ks that make up at least 4 or 5 different giveaways. Sometimes I have to put them in all towards the very end because back in the school session, of course, now means that I'm going to be a little bit more delayed there. But I know that I'm about to put on right now a giveaway for the film Ballerina, the 4K steelbook of that. I've got a couple of copies there, so I'm going to be putting that available along with a bunch of other films that I have just, again, gotten piled up over the last couple of weeks. So if you want access to things like that, if you want access to a great community, you guys seriously are all amazing and beautiful. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and as always, God bless.